Do you have questions about pricing? Have you struggled with figuring out how on earth do I put a price to my expertise, to the transformations that I can make in the world? Do you struggle with the whole money question when it comes to building your business? Well, then this episode is the one for you. Welcome back to the show. My name is Kimberly Weitkamp. I am your host. I am a conversion copywriter, podcaster, and marketing strategist. And I love telling people and bringing on great experts to answer the questions all about how to grow and scale a business that works for you. And as always, I have a wonderful and fantastic expert to help me. I want to welcome Patty Block to the More Conversations, Clients, and Cash podcast. Patty helps women business owners who are experts in their fields fine-tune their operations and scale their revenue for strategic growth. Right? She came across a few years a really shocking statistic, which is something I have heard before many, many times as a member of the Mentoress Collective, that 62% of women rely on their businesses for their primary income, but 88% of those businesses generate less than $100,000 in annual revenue. So her mission is teaching women how to generate more revenue with less stress, always nice, by reimagining pricing and selling. She's raised 3 fantastic kids, all of whom have launched their careers and also work in her company. Essentially, she raised her own workforce, which is kind of cool. And another way, I guess, to potentially save costs. But Patty is here today to talk with us about revenue, about how to position it ourselves, and how to make sure that we are able to grow and scale to the revenue numbers that are going to best support our lifestyle. So, Patty, I want to say thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, indeed. So before we dive in, I've got a first question for you. How did you get doing what you're doing? Because here's the thing, right? You are all about women entrepreneurs. You're all about helping them figure out their pricing and everything. But, I just find it fascinating how many people begin this entrepreneurial journey and how many different paths there are. So tell me a little bit about how you got started to become this person who's really great at helping people position themselves to really get paid what they're worth.
You bet. So the Block Group is the second company that I've owned. Many years ago, I owned a company that focused on political consulting and lobbying. And my biggest frustration in that business was that my revenue was tied to the election cycle. So one of the ways I wanted to figure out how to even out my revenue, stop having the revenue swings, and making all my money in one particular time of year. So it's kind of like a tax accountant who makes most of their money during tax season. So I found that really frustrating, but equally frustrating was that if there were resources to help me grow and scale my business, I didn't know how to find them and I didn't know who to trust. And especially operating in the political arena, you don't trust anybody. So that was a huge problem for me. And the longer I had that business, the more I wanted to be that resource for other women business owners. I didn't have a clue about pricing. I didn't have a clue about selling. I kept thinking I need to take more and more clients. The more clients I have, the more money I'll make. And it's a trap that we fall into. And I wanted to shortcut that for other women so that they could really understand we don't have to follow the old corporate model that was created for men by men. We can create our own realities, step into our own power, and run our companies in a way that works better for us. And that's what I teach.
Wow. Fantastic. It's so interesting, right? That so many of us, we get started and we don't really know what we're doing, but we know we are passionate about making a difference, about making a change, about doing something different, right? So to go from this this type of business where you were an entrepreneur, right? You were running your own business for yourself, but having it all tied into a specific time of year, right? That's something a lot of us as entrepreneurs do struggle with, is cash flow, is figuring out how to make sure that everything kind of builds up and it's not this revenue roller coaster that most of us are on. So I find that so fascinating that you're like, you know what? I just need resources. If I had a resource, I would be able to do it. So you decided to become that resource. So tell me a little bit then about, you've mentioned that you don't have to be tied to a particular time and that you wanted to be that resource. So what is it that when it comes to entrepreneurs and when it comes to entrepreneurial women and when it comes to pricing, what is it that you find is that biggest obstacle most people come across?
The biggest obstacle is our mindset. And I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, my mom used to make these fabulous cookies. The whole house smelled good. It was warm. The cookies were gooey, kind of makes your mouth water. And the whole time I was growing up, I watched my mom eat the broken cookies. But it wasn't until I was a teenager that I even thought to ask her, why do you only eat the broken cookies? Do they taste better? And she laughed and said, no, I eat the broken cookies so you can have the whole ones. And coupled with the statistic that you just read, that 62% of women rely on their business for their primary income, yet 88% of those businesses bring in less than $100,000 a year. And when I heard that statistic, this image of my mom eating the broken cookies popped into my head. And I thought, that is exactly what we as women are doing in our companies, is we're bringing this spirit of self-sacrifice. It's what I call the broken cookie effect. And we seem to believe that we can't serve others and still make a lot of money. So that was connecting the dots for me and realizing that our mindset is acting like a self-imposed glass ceiling. And a lot of my clients, because I work with women that are experts in their fields, a lot of my clients have come out of corporate jobs. And again, the old corporate model was designed for men by men. It never worked well for women, and it sure doesn't work well today. But in reality, I think the old corporate model doesn't work well for any small business. And that's a huge struggle, especially because we have this paradox that we have to deal with, especially as women, that we want to run our companies on our own terms. However, we self-impose this glass ceiling, keep our businesses relatively limited, small, often limited in terms of revenue. And at the same time, everyone in the marketplace is telling us that scaling your company is the primary measure of success. And yet I work with lots of people who have no interest in scaling their company. They want to bring in more money. They want more time freedom. They want lots of other things, but having a bigger company is not interesting to them. So helping women balance out this conundrum is a big part of my mission.
I can definitely see where that plays in. Just, as somebody who runs their own company, right? I'm self-employed. I'm a sole proprietor for the most part. And I've heard from so many other people, they're like, oh, well, you should add all of these other services that I don't actually do and get contractors to do them for people. And then you can, offer bigger packages. And I was like, that sounds like adding project management, which is not what I want to do. That's not my favorite thing. That's not my love. That's not my passion. I want to help people figure out how to turn their message into the right words so they can connect and change more lives. And I'm like, and that none of that includes figuring out how to teach somebody how to use technology. Like, that's not on my agenda, right? But I've heard from so many people who are like, yeah, you should turn into an agency. You should bundle your packages so that it's a one-stop shop. All these different ideas. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not what I want to do. But I can see where that ties in for so many of us as entrepreneurs, where we're like, oh, we have to do everything. We have to do everything. Not only when it comes to our business, we have to be our accountant, our marketer, our graphic designer, our web developer, our back end person, right? But we also have to be everything for our clients. And the reality is we're usually a really great person for our clients for something, but not for everything. So, and I think that ties into positioning and ties into really showcasing your value and how your value is a standalone value for your clients. So can you tell me a little bit about how you help people, or how people can notice when they're struggling with the positioning to get the right pricing?
Sure. I'm going to step to the side a little bit in order to answer that question. So a lot of the things that we think are problems in our business are really symptoms. So when we are not generating the appropriate amount of revenue so that we can really be profitable, or we have these big revenue swings, kind of like a revenue roller coaster, when those things happen, those are symptoms of other things. And yet we act like those are the problems and we have to fix those problems. When you fix the root problem, which I think all stems from pricing, then some of those symptoms will go away. And the issue with pricing is that a lot of people feel as though they should be paid, quote, what they're worth. And I reject that notion because I believe every human has innate value. So it's not about what I'm worth. It's about the value in my buyer's mind. And fortunately, I have the ability and the insight to build that value in the mind of my ideal buyer. And that's part of what I teach. You can, sometimes we feel so powerless to be able to help people understand our value. And a lot of times, especially for women, we don't know how to talk about it. We feel like we're bragging. I'm based in Texas, and we have a saying here, it's not bragging if it's true. And that's really an important thing to understand when you have clarity around the value that you bring to your clients. And exactly to your point, Kimberly, you cannot be all things to all people, nor should you try to be. And the more you try to do that, the more you're going to dilute the results you can get for your clients. So we've all kind of evolved into these specialties, and that's not a bad thing. And it also means that you as a business owner need to surround yourself with valuable resources that you can trust that help you with different areas of your business. And that actually is a very good model for small business owners.
I thought you were going to say everything's bigger in Texas. That's the phrase I know for Texas. But you know what? Here's another phrase a lot of us have heard. The riches are in the niches, right? And that's true. When you try and be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to no one. And that really you'll see a lot when it comes to marketing, right? I'll talk with people and I'll get clients and guests and prospects and just connection calls. And they're like, well, I don't want to offend anybody. I'm worried that I'm going to bother someone. So I don't want to go that narrow. What if I turn people away? So reminding ourselves that we get to decide who we work with. So you can choose what your specialty is. And then anyone who does come in the door, whether or not they align with your specialty, you still get to decide if you're going to work with them or not. And that's kind of what I try and position the marketing thing as for people as well. It's like, look, you're not excluding anybody. You are being inclusive of the best fit. You can provide the best results for that type of person. And that's who you want to connect with, right? Because if someone comes to you and they're not your ideal client, can you really give them the best results, or should you send them to somebody else? It's always a great question to ask. So I love what you said about building a resource center, right? Not only for your own business, but for your clients and for other people that you're going to send out. But back to the pricing question, what is that first thing we should ask ourselves about how we can position ourselves to be valuable in your mind? I love what you said about, every person has value. That's so true. And then I've heard as well, right? Oh, you should charge what you're worth. Well, what is that number? Who decides that number? For women, we often underestimate what that number is. And for men, they're like, any number I choose is fine. So how do you get started with that?
It's a great question. And it's actually a tricky question. I mentioned a minute ago about mindset. So you can do all the calculations you want. You can build a pricing model. You can do all kinds of structural things. But when it comes down to talking about your pricing is where we really stumble. And you're absolutely right. We as women undervalue ourselves. Going back to that broken cookie idea, we undervalue ourselves and we underprice our services. And this is so pervasive. I work with lots and lots of women across the country, and I founded my company in 2006. So I've been doing this a long time, and I work only with women business owners.
Just a few years.
It is really pervasive that the pricing is so low for most women business owners. And they're not only afraid to raise prices, but they're afraid to change the way they're doing things. So mindset is a big hurdle to get over first. It's about your relationship with money, how you grew up, how money was handled in your home of origin, how you handle money as an adult, how, if you've had children, how you teach your children to handle money. All of those things factor in to how you handle money in your business. And when you start with pricing, so I have a program called value-driven pricing, and we always start with the mindset piece. We progress until we get to the mechanics. And I'm not someone who always says you need to raise prices. I'm someone who says adding structure and a rationale to your pricing builds your confidence to talk about it. So if you're not ready to make a leap to substantially raise your prices, that's okay. If you build that structure, that pricing model, and you get comfortable talking about your pricing, building value in the mind of your buyer, and helping them understand the kinds of results that you get and all the value that you bring, all of that, eventually you'll be ready to increase prices. So it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, but it can change. It is a game changer for the women that I've taught to do this. It's why I'm so passionate about it, because it is such a game changer. And so many things that you might not realize flow from your pricing. Almost everything in your business flows from your pricing, including who you can hire, when you can hire, what software systems you put into place, how well you can take care of your clients. Just a myriad of things all flow from pricing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I participated in a survey, and it was among copywriters. And somebody, a woman, right, who's become a big name, big six-figure, one of the few that actually gets known about. And she was a female copywriter. And so she conducted this survey. And, you know, it's something like women make 83 cents on the dollar versus men. And that's in the corporate world. Among freelancers and copywriters, the number was even lower. Like women were imposing an even lower price for themselves, right? But also it ties into that. I love what you said about, you know, becoming comfortable, because you do have to be comfortable with what you're saying, with what you're doing, and explaining that value. You know, I've gotten a lot of just questions over the years from people about like, well, it takes how much to write a single email? And it's not about writing a single email. It's not about sending 300 words to your audience. It's about the results that you can get. So when I tell people, yeah, you know, the last person I wrote for, they increased their email list by 40%. Oh, well, there's value, right? It was their biggest ever course launch. Well, there's value. And it's not about, you know, how many words it is, or what's the hourly rate, right? For me personally, if somebody asks me what my hourly rate is, that's a red flag for me, because they're not understanding the value of how you can work with somebody. And that's a really great question for all of us to kind of just sit down and contemplate, is what are the results? And it's so funny because that's what I ask people to do for their marketing too. It's like, what is the result people can get by attending your masterclass? That's where you start with creating your marketing. And it's the same thing where it starts with your pricing, right? What is the result? And that's what you're going to tie that number to. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about you and your business for a bit. You know, I love talking about community and how people build their communities and how people use their communities to make an impact. So how are you building the Block group and your community?
Several different ways. So in 2019, I went completely virtual, of course, having no idea there was going to be a global pandemic, and started expanding my company nationwide. And it is one of the best business decisions I've ever made. Started developing business in specific target cities, and now work with women across the country. So that has been a fabulous way to expand. But the other thing I did was add a group coaching component called the Revenue Roundtable. And that brings together women business owners that are experts in their fields in a variety of industries. And we all have that common mission of generating more revenue with less stress. So all of the members take my program, Value-Driven Pricing, so that we have this common language. We're all working on mindset. we're all workshopping real life situations that we may have with prospects or sometimes with clients. One of the big questions is, if I'm raising my prices or I'm changing the structure, what should I do with my current clients? And my answer is, you're the boss. You get to choose. And if you want to leave your current clients at their current rates or their current structure, that's fine. That's what I call, instead of grandfathering, I call it grandmothering. And you can grandmother your current clients. Or you could give them notice to say, as of this date, I'm using a new pricing structure and this is how it works. Your clients already know your value. That's why they continue working with you. That's why they make introductions for you or send you referrals. So in many ways, while we feel really afraid to tell our current clients, those are the people we should start with because they already know and trust us. So there are lots of different ways that you can approach pricing. And I think a lot of times we forget we have choices. So that's one thing that I remind people. You have a lot of choices. And so that's the benefit of the Revenue Roundtable, is that we come together as a community and we're there not only to support each other, but to challenge each other. And I think that's equally important, that we help hold each other accountable. And although I'm often teaching, and also in addition to pricing strategies, we're working on selling strategies. A lot of sales strategies, again, most developed by men for men, don't work for women. And so I have a sales method that I teach so that you can develop a process and get comfortable with that. And it's not about convincing anyone of anything. It's, to your earlier point, it's about finding the right match and treating selling much more like matchmaking.
It's an interesting approach for sure. And, I love that you're building a community, that you're helping all these people kind of challenge each other. But I find what's really valuable as well is, no matter how established or how new we are in our business, to realize that we are not alone in the things that we are struggling with. So obviously you've got the pricing thing dialed in, but what would you say is something that you're currently working through, or an obstacle you have with growing your own business right now?
Probably expanding my audience is the biggest issue. And I do a lot of interviews and speaking engagements with that goal in mind. And it works extremely well, although it's time consuming. But I think expanding my audience, having the right ears hear my message and having it resonate with people that I can help. And that was my whole concept of expanding my company nationwide, was so that I could reach and help more women business owners.
There you go. It's a great goal to have, and a great process that you're putting in place for people. I know it's something a lot of women I've met over the years in our world have struggled with. So what would you say is like that first step? What is the next action item people can take if they're ready to finally take control of their revenue, take control of the revenue roller coaster? What should they do first?
It's such a tricky question because I think there are several steps. And the first is to become aware of what's happening inside your business. We want to believe that we're profitable when it's very rare for a company, especially a small business, to be profitable. And you can be profitable one day and not the next, or 1 month and not the next. So getting a good handle on your financial state inside your business is really important. And also, excuse me, and also to get clarity. What are your goals? What revenue are you interested in bringing in? If you have the revenue roller coaster, start looking at the trends. Are there certain times of year that that's happening? Are there certain events that are causing those dips in your revenue? Are you losing clients at a particular point in the engagement? Start making yourself aware of what is happening inside your business. That's also where a business advisor or a business coach can be super helpful, because we are looking at things objectively. And your business is not our baby. So we can help you see the reality of what's happening and how to address it. So that's the first thing, is the awareness and the clarity. The other thing I would say is, when we talk about building value, I recommend an exercise that everyone in your audience could do today. And that is, ask a colleague who knows you well to sit down and do an exercise with you. They will write down all the things that they believe bring value to your clients that you're providing, and you do the same for them. And there will be things on that list that you have not thought of. And I know when I've gone through this exercise, I've had people put the word calm. And I would never have written that down for myself. I know I am very calm, and I know my clients count on that, especially when they're upset about something. But I wouldn't have listed being calm as a value that I bring to my clients. And so that is really eye-opening when you start to see your business from somebody else's perspective. And then you can take action around that. You can use that in your messaging. You can test it and talk with some of your clients and your prospects and see what is resonating. So there are several different steps that I think members of your audience could take today to start to understand the value, to get comfortable talking about it, and to understand what's happening financially inside their business.
Absolutely. So, just a nice quick summary for everybody. Number one, right? Know your numbers, knowing your numbers, sitting down and actually looking at, where are you at? Are you really profitable? What is your definition of profitable? And of course, I love that exercise of sitting down with a colleague and having both of you list out your best qualities so that you can both get a nice little boost. Because it is something that I easily tell people, they're like, you don't know what to say in your emails? Well, go ask a friend to answer the question. Go ask a friend to go ahead and sit down so you can explain it to them, so you get that starting point. So Patty, I want to say thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your wisdom with us today. And if people want to learn more about you and what you do, where should they go?
Well, I'd like to offer your audience a free quiz. It's myrevenueroadblocks.com. And that helps you determine, it's part of that awareness of understanding where are the roadblocks when you're trying to increase your revenue. And when you take that quiz, you get a report and information that will help you get started. You can also visit my website at theblockgroup.net. And I have a free white paper. I have lots of free resources for women business owners. And you can also reach out to me through my website, theblockgroup.net.
Fantastic. So everyone, be sure to go ahead and, find out where your revenue roadblocks are. You might be surprised about what they are. Go to myrevenueroadblocks.com. And of course, check out Patty and all of her amazing free resources at theblockgroup.net. Remember, .net, not .com. And of course, as always, all of those links are in the show notes for you to connect and learn more about Patty and your own revenue roadblocks. Again, Patty, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you. This has been great.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the More Conversations, Clients, and Cash podcast. We definitely focused on the cash part of the name today. And we were talking all about how to make sure to value yourself, value what you do, and how to tie your value to your pricing so that you can get off the revenue roller coaster and make more revenue with less stress. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, keep calm and go take that quiz.